Welcome back to the Lifestyle Lifters Show. And today I'm joined by a fellow online fitness coach, but also a fellow Galwegian. Currently resides in Sydney, Australia. And today I have Barry O'Sullivan. Barry, welcome to the Lifestyle Lifters Show.
Thanks very much for having me on, man. Very exciting. I know we did an Instagram live there lately, so it was good to catch up again and have a bit of a longer conversation about a few topics. So delighted to have me on, man. Really appreciate it.
Let's do it. Barry, let's start out. So share something to our listeners about yourself that most people do not know. We know you're jacked, we know you're shredded, Barry, but what's something about Barry O'Sullivan that most people do not know?
I suppose the people that know me very well, or like know me from school and stuff, would know most about me. Maybe for people who've only followed me online and stuff, and might be listening to this and would know me, would maybe know that, like, for years rugby was the biggest thing in my life. I played rugby all my life, and that's what actually got me into this profession. I was always the scrum half, the smallest lad on any field, and when I got of age, basically, to get bigger, I was in the gym, and it just took off from there, and I loved it. And next thing I realized, I could make a career at it because I was passionate about it. So I suppose that's the biggest thing, how rugby was initially where it was at, and that's how I found myself in this career path. So yeah, that's one that maybe not everybody knows. So
and we can't talk about rugby, Barry, until you dive a little deeper now into your family, which is obviously steeped in rugby history. So for all of our new listeners, Barry, do you want to share maybe what another fact that maybe not a lot of people know?
I don't really, to be honest, but you're after calling me on it now. But yeah, like, look, having dad coaching you like that, like at a top level, with the Irish team and stuff like that, that was obviously an incredible experience. And I've said it to my friends lately, like, it's only at the time I was so young, like, you appreciated it, but you were really just, you were going along where you didn't, again, you appreciated it, but you didn't realize how big it was, and it was great. But yeah, incredible. And I think, like I said, it was so the whole love for rugby and all that was it was instilled in me. It wasn't even an option, to be honest with you. So but yeah, it was great. It was great. Like, and like I said, the knock-on effect from it, has me doing a career path that I absolutely love. So blessed, to be honest with you.
Unbelievable. And Barry, I will start out also by saying, when I really started getting into the fitness space, I first of all, I just looked at people similar to me, or who I aspired to be, and who I kind of wanted to model. And I hadn't to look any further than people from Galway, because there was Brian Kane Fitness, Pat Tivity. This was now back in the day when I was just starting out, and Barry O'Sullivan. They were like the three names that I would have kind of looked up. Of course, yeah, no, absolutely. Just to, like, geez, these guys are doing so well in the health and fitness space. Maybe someday that could be me. So here we are. Absolutely. This is what 7-8 years later.
Here we are
having a third conversation. So it's mad the way it all goes around. But Barry, let's dive into it. Obviously, perfect. Health and fitness training, it's a big part of our lifestyle. And I've been lifting for just short of 10 years now. You're definitely have a couple more years on me, and we've definitely made a couple of mistakes along the way. So today's topic is actually stemming off this, and what we're going to talk about is the top 5 gym mistakes to avoid and what to do instead.
Yes. Perfect. Sounds good. I think, like I said, we could talk for days about this, and I think there's going to be a lot of golden gems here that people, that might be new to the gym, or younger folk that can really take from and save them a certain amount of hassle and time.
Absolutely, yeah. And just both of us will preface by saying, by no means are Barry and I perfect, because we've made every single one of these mistakes at some stage in our careers. And for anyone listening, we're trying to teach you to avoid these mistakes, so that you don't add years to add a couple of extra unnecessary years, which is obviously going to prolong and delay your results. So Barry, what's the first most common mistake that we actually see?
Yeah. So I suppose it's a, you have to start with the general lack of programming and structure specific to your goals. And it really boils back to, when you come into a gym or you plan on, if it's a New Year's resolution, whatever it is, you have to kind of outline first. You bring it back to, what are my goals here? What am I trying to achieve? If we take commonly, because it's kind of more so what we specialize in, of hypertrophy or fat loss, we know that we have to break that up into different areas. Now, generally speaking, in terms of energy balance, energy in and energy out, we break it into our nutrition. And secondly, we break it into our training. It just tends to be where I still see it when I train one-to-one clients as well still. And when they come into a gym, you see new members come in, they generally obviously aren't going to know the ins and outs of everything. Like, that's just like we would have. That's completely normal. And I think where people, I know we're biased in that we say, people should get a trainer, should get help, but you definitely skip a few chapters and you save yourself a lot of time and energy when you get a bit of help like that. Because without it, they just tend to see people, kind of getting off on the wrong track. They might be training pretty well, pretty hard, but then their nutrition is madly off, and that really, really hinders results. Or just vice versa, where they might be eating pretty well, but for their goals, their training just isn't where it needs to be at. They're not training at the right intensity, at the right volume. The result, unfortunately, is with both, is that people fall short of results. They've put in the certain amount of work to an extent, and they're not seeing the results, and that's why we see people falling off and just kind of
100%.
giving up with these sort of things. So I think that's the biggest one. I don't know, do you share in that kind of viewpoint, that's the
Yes.
kind of the first one that pops to mind?
Yeah, definitely. Like, just not following a plan or not having any structure, or routine to go off. I actually love the way you mentioned there about like having a coach. Look, I have a coach when it comes to like more so like the business side of things. And what it allows you to do is it effectively allows you to jump from chapter 1 to chapter 5 instead of having to read through chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You shorten your learning curve. That's the big benefit of hiring someone who's more advanced than you are. But I definitely agree. The number one most common mistake I see people make is actually not following the plan. And look, I'll preface by saying my kind of first couple of years lifting, maybe 2013 to 2015, there was 2 years there where I hadn't a plan at all going to the gym. It was just like, going from machine to machine, bicep curl to tricep push down. You finish off with a bit of core. You do the exact same routine day in and day out. So I've actually gone full 360 on this. Now, my least favorite gym sessions, Barry, are the ones where I do not have a plan. So even if I'm going away like on a staycation or something, and I know there's a bit of a gym there, what I'll do is I'll plan out something for 30 to 45 minutes and give me maybe 10 or 15 minutes of almost free play, do as I please. But I just always like to have something to follow. So 100% agreed. Not following a plan, not having routine, not having structure, Barry.
100%.
100%. Yeah. So then the second most common mistake that we see, Barry, I'll let you kind of dive into this one. We mentioned testing strength versus building strength. Barry, what does this exactly mean?
Yeah, this is the one. I think this is getting such a reaction because it brings me back to the gym in my local, where I went to school in Montbellew, and it was the first time we'd been started lifting, and we would be in there, and we would be just basically going in and putting as much weight as you can on the bench press and trying to max out on these lifts. Trying to move weight for partial ranges of motion that you've no business moving, and basically, it was all ego driven, but also not having a clue. Like, at the same time, you probably still thought you were doing the right things. You thought this is how you build muscle. You try and, move this weight and move that. But it was that sort of thing of literally, it's a great way of putting it, like testing versus building strength. Training at 1 RMs and stuff like that. And just not giving the body the right amount of volume and stress to adapt to grow. It's something that I think, like I said, it brings us back to our first point of, if you don't have an idea what you're doing when you go into the gym, you're going to be kind of just, I suppose, stabbing in the dark and trying these things out. And again, that's where we kind of come into it. And like we said, we've been there, made these mistakes. Is that saying like smart people learn from their mistakes, but very smart people learn from other people?
I love it.
Mistakes. So I think that, like, you know, people listen to this will be like, just that's why we're trainers, I think, because we initially went through this phase and then we figured out what was right and what was wrong. But yeah, I think it's very ties in with point one. It's that sort of thing of, you know, not actually training specifically, and when you come in and not having a plan of action and a specific program to work off, knowing what weight to be moving, you know, the right RPEs, the right intensity, the right volume, all those sort of things. Yeah, like, do you feel the same? You know, like, it's
Yeah,
obviously something that
absolutely.
resonates with you, like we
Yeah.
said, those first few years.
Yeah, testing strength versus building strength. Like, honestly,
Mm,
when I used to work out with some of the lads in Mary I Gym, and even actually in America, every Friday we went to 24-hour fitness. It was in Berkeley, where we
mm.
spent 12 weeks there. And every Friday I always did like the decline bench press, Barry. And for some reason, like decline for me, I'm actually stronger in decline than I am on the flat bench. So that was like, first of all, as you said already, ego driven. I wanted to
Yeah,
like to shift as much weight as possible. And
yeah,
I did work up to some decent weight. I remember I got lifting up to maybe 110 kilos for a single. But every single week, Barry, it was just like testing that 110. See, can I do it? Testing the 110.
yeah,
Come the end of that summer, I wasn't even able to lift 100 kilos. All right. So
yeah,
my,
yeah.
my strength actually decreased. And why was this? It's something now I try to do every single day. After a gym session, I'll just do a quick analysis. I'll count my number of reps, as you said. So, like, imagine someone was to do the bench press and person A was doing 5x5. Okay, that's 25 total working reps. And the
Mm,
second person, they hop on, they put 60 kilos on the bench. They do a warm up set of 3 or 4. They throw another 5 kilos on. They do 70 for a double. They slap 80 on the bar and they get buried. How many reps do
mm.
they do? Their total number of reps is 7 or 8. So like
Well,
someone who's
single
doing
digit.
25 reps, and you're doing that every single week, that's 100 total working reps in a month, compared to someone who did working reps, probably 5 or 6 per session, and that's like a quarter of it. So yeah, just that's the analogy: testing strength versus building strength. And as you said, Barry,
Exactly.
just counting up the number of reps you actually do and the volume,
Yeah.
and that adding up over time.
That's it. You break it down like that, you know, literally to numbers, you see how the lack of total overall volume is just not going to be sufficient. Like we know as well, I mean, when we're talking about that strength training, you know, if you're in the gym like we were, and like what we're like, generally the audience we're speaking to right now is to build muscle and say in term, you know, for argument's sake, burn body fat.
Yeah.
Working in those, you know, single, you know, doing doubles, singles, and triples, that's strength training. You know, you're talking more what a powerlifter does, which will build muscle tissue, but it's going to be far from optimal. So that's why,
Absolutely.
like I said, that lack of, and especially when you come into the gym, we do know that if we haven't lifted at all we have to do is pick up a dumbbell, and that is going to elicit some sort of a response. But we keep doing that for a couple of weeks and months, and like you found out there yourself over the 3 or 4 months of the summer, your body's just like, all right, I'm getting sick of this, chief. It's not going to do much, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It was so ego driven as well. Like it was just like, I'll never forget the
100%.
first time I lifted 100. A guy who plays football with Cortoon Shamrocks. I nearly have the date lined out. Like he was leaving the gym and I said, any chance for spot? And he spotted me or whatever. I remember it, 100 kilos, and it was like, ever since then, I was like, look, provided I'm able to lift 100 kilos, I'm happy out. But then by the end of that summer, of all places, I wanted to lift 100. It was in Muscle Beach in LA, Barry, but I wasn't
Yeah,
able to do it simply because I didn't do enough volume throughout the summer. I was testing my strength instead of building the strength. So
yeah,
just to recap, the
100%.
first one, not following a plan. Number two, testing strength versus building strength.
Mm.
Barry, what's the third most common mistake that we've made and that we see people make?
I think you kind of have to touch specifically on, you know, the calories, and the dietary side of things. You know, caloric intake is just a huge part of it. Now you can talk about nutrition specifically, and you know, if you fall short on your diet, and you're not reaching your goals because of that, you know, due to energy balance. But you could also talk about your calories or lack of calories not helping you in the gym, you know, your lack of performance. Like it's most common thing I see is, you know, when I screen a new client and we have a look at their diet in general. And, you know, obviously if it's somebody who needs to lose weight, they might be eating too much food. We know that that's, you know, simple energy balance. But at the same time, even if it's somebody who's undereating or overeating, they might not be fueling themselves very well. So they might be overeating. That's very easy to happen through hyperpalatable foods, binge drinking at the weekends and stuff like that. But when we look at something like actually fueling our bodies for training sessions, that's a different dynamic altogether. Like I don't think people realize the power of carbohydrates when it comes to weight training, and getting enough of them in. It's just a massive part of it. So I think, you know, depending on your goals, you know, the beauty of it being, you know, you can talk about energy balance, you know, surpluses and deficits, but even if you're in a deficit, you need it, even more so if you're in a deficit, you need to optimize your nutrition around your training so that you're going to get the most out of your sessions. Because, you know, as we know, it's, you know, carbohydrates, for example, you know, we store them as glycogen, and then it's essentially like what petrol is to a car. That's what it is to us in our weight session. So I think massively that's something where people fall short. You know, their actual meals and their macronutrients can be very much off. And then just like I said, if you take a step back and you're saying regarding to someone's goals in general, we know if somebody is trying to lose weight, we have to get them into that energy deficit on a consistent basis. Or if they're trying to build mass, like I'm doing at the moment, we've got to get those calories in, and we have to be in that surplus on a consistent basis. I'd say you probably find the same. I know you do, because working with clients, they're probably no different to the people I work with, and they run into those same issues, and it's those same fundamentals that you really have to lock down and hit home with them. That look, if we can do all these things right, we can have the best supplements, we can have technically the best training program, but if our calories are off, if our intake is wrong, we're not going to get where we want to be goals wise.
Yeah, no, I actually agreed on both ends there, though. Like wrong calorie intake, it's not just for fat loss, but also for muscle gain. Because I'd actually preface by starting out with muscle gain. Like a lot of people, I'm sure you've heard the same, Barry. They come to me and they say, like, you know, I don't know, I eat so much, and no matter what I do, I just can't seem to gain weight. Like I just think I'm a hard gainer. And like, okay, sure, Barry. How about you send me on a 3-day food diary? Let's just have a look and see what you've been eating. And it's like breakfast, you know, I was in a rush in the morning, so I just got like a coffee on the go and one of those protein bars. At lunchtime, I had a sandwich, and then I didn't eat for 7 or 8 hours because I trained straight away when I got home and had my dinner afterwards. Okay, so you've had like 1 square meal and 2 small snacks, and the thing is, though, they say they can't eat anymore because they have a big dinner and they stuff themselves up, which means the following day, the morning time, they're not hungry, and it's just that cycle that repeats.
Yeah.
So
100%.
it applies for muscle gain as much as fat loss. But I think, would you agree, Barry, like a big element of this would actually be like just assessment and tracking, and without being like obsessive. We always say like calculate without obsessing, but if you're not assessing like how much food you're actually eating, you're just guessing. So like 100%. How important do you feel, Barry, it is for someone who either has specific fat loss goals or muscle gain goals to actually at least have some form of like calorie tracking or calorie monitoring in place?
It's massive, man. It's literally in a large, given insight, like in a large amount of a portion of cases, like with my clients, it's one of the first things we do. It's stage 1 of nutrition. It's tracking calories for several days, a week or two. Again, this all depends on the client, but generally speaking, it's tracking, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think long term, you know, there's nothing to say people need to be tracking long term. It's arguably not healthy. But it's one of those things, you know, you'll hear some people saying, oh, tracking calories is unhealthy. That's kind of like saying, you know, doing a financial budget for your money is unhealthy. It's like, that's ridiculous. So it's one of those things, definitely. And again, it's to firstly see what your habits of your client. It's firstly to see for that person, how much they're actually taking in on a consistent basis. Like, they don't know. We're kind of just stabbing in the dark otherwise. We don't have a clue of numbers. It's literally feedback for us and data to say, okay, this is how much we're taking in, because usually it's an eye opener for that person as well. They're kind of like, let's track for a while. And they say, I don't eat that much. And then we actually track, and we track properly.
100%.
And suddenly the calories are, much more than they thought. And within the calories, their protein is actually very, very low. So very, very common to see this.
Yeah,
And again, it's just
agreed.
that feedback. Yeah, it's the biggest thing to get that feedback and say, okay, so at least we know then this is where they are. And it could be something like, they're actually consistent during the week. And then we, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we see a massive increase again. So it's kind of just seeing the patterns in that person's weekly routine and stuff like that, and how we can approach that. It's a massive, massive part of it. And at least then you know where to go from there, because I think something that trainers have to be very careful of as well is if you just have a client come along and you think, okay, I think they need to be on these amount of calories, I recommend they are in this amount or this range of calories. We need to know where they were first, because if
Exactly.
they were
100%.
at X and you bring them to Y, if that drop is too big, or if that's a massive increase or decrease, that's not necessarily how you want it to be. So you want to do things gradually. So you want to see exactly where they were to begin with, and again, to just give us overall feedback on the matter, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think in PN Precision Nutrition, they kind of, their approach is like outcome-based decision. I remember I had a client actually, and he
Mm,
played rugby, Barry, and to be fair, like he actually would have been what we would call or classify as a hard gainer. So like we had
yes.
to up his calories to I think over like around about the 4,000 mark before he actually
Mm,
managed to increase his weight, because he was just so active. He was like, he was doing rugby three times a week, would say. He was training in the gym. Prior to this, he was doing like CrossFit work, which didn't really carry over to the rugby, but that's another story anyways. But
yeah.
he actually was like, eating a decent amount of food, but even at 3,000 calories, he wasn't able to gain weight. So I think it just comes to a point. I remember myself after I did a marathon with, I'm sure you know, Garrow Smith in
What?
2018. And my goal was to like, because I would have lost quite a lot of weight there. My goal was to bring it back up. And I found the sweet spot for me, like 4,000 calories. I was in a nice kind of gain phase there where I was adding maybe 0.5 kilos per week for 8 weeks. And I added 4 kilos in the space of 8 to 9 weeks, but it was just because that intake is right. So then on the
Yeah.
flip side, I feel, Barry, if someone's kind of saying, well, I can't lose any weight, the long and the hard of it is like you're not in a deficit, because I'm sure you find the same, Barry. Like when someone says, I this stir fry. Okay, cool. Like a chicken stir fry, that sounds amazing. Lovely. Did you use any oil in that? Oh yeah, I forgot to track the oil. Or did you put in any
Yeah.
butter on that? Oh,
Yeah.
all of these add up. Like they're like the domino foods, Barry, that a lot of people forget about as well.
Mm, yeah, that's simply it. Like, yeah, you said it there yourself. I think, like, I remember I've done a post on this as well. I think like it was like 5 or 6 ways that calories kind of sneak into our diet that people don't
Brilliant.
even kind of think about. I think it's funny, one, like that people, they mightn't feel the need to include a coffee, or like, the milk that comes in their coffee. And it's not that we're saying, okay, you are not in a deficit because you have a drop of milk in your coffee every day. It's not that. But if you're somebody who has a couple of cups of coffee, you're adding that up there, and you're probably getting full fat milk into it.
And the
You're adding that
biscuit or
in.
two to go with it that you don't
This
have.
is it, like somebody at work like has a few sweets and they pass, I'll take a sweet. So that happens once or twice. You get home and you're cooking and you're putting something on for the kids and you're licking the spoon a couple of times. These sort of things that we don't think of.
Yeah,
All of those in accumulation, along with the calories that we're probably misinterpreting or under tracking with.
yeah,
That's what's essentially leading to our overall surplus, and that kind of
100%.
struggle to get
Yeah,
into the deficit to lose the
yeah.
weight.
Oh, perfect.
100%.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail in the head there, Barry. So just to recap so far, not following a plan, testing the strength versus building the strength, wrong calorie intake. The next one then that we mentioned, Barry, let's talk about this. Like, just suppose someone out there following a plan, okay, and they're not always testing their strength, they're actually focusing on building strength, and maybe, you know, their calories are right or roundabout right for their specific goals, but then just inconsistency, Barry. Let's kind of talk about
Yeah.
this for a few minutes.
It's that's a very interesting one, man. The whole inconsistency of it, and the adherence of it all, if you like, because you know, like you said, you can have the perfect program in the world, the perfect diet in the world, and I think people have this perception. We all do it, where we think, or like, when I get this sorted now, or when I get this next thing, or when I upgrade, you know, like all these sort of things, that then I'll be flying it and I'll be on my way. But as we know, that's not the way it is. Like, it's still going to be just, it's difficult. You're just going to still have that guidance, but it's still going to be very, very difficult. So, I mean, you could pull it back to many things. Like, you know, are you doing it for the right reasons? Or are you, you know, are you looking at it? Because I think sometimes, you know, I've had situations where I know I've had clients in the past, more on a one-to-one basis, and they were kind of training with me because maybe their mother encouraged them to do it. Their mother was at them for months to get back in shape. And it's kind of like, well, that's great. And it's great to have that support network and something. At the end of the day, it has to come from within yourself. And until that happens, and you really want to make the changes for yourself for the right reasons, it's you will probably find yourself kind of, you know, I have to train instead of I get to train, and you will
I
find
love
yourself
it.
kind of dragging
Yeah,
yourself. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
definitely, like, you know, the inconsistency of it all, and those sort of things. It's a tough one, and it's like something that ties in with the whole people looking for motivation and inspiration and stuff like that.
definitely.
So
Yeah,
there's many ways of looking at it, but I think, you know, firstly, all we can do, like, from our perspective as trainers, is all we can do is tailor the program as well as possible
yes,
as we can
yeah,
to that person and their
yeah,
lifestyle. Because, you know, there's times, I'm sure you've seen this as well, where a client will say to you, you'll screen them, we'll talk about, okay, how many days a week would you like to train? And they'll be like, oh, 6 days. And you're like, okay, look, we're gonna, like, I admire the enthusiasm, but you don't need to train for 6 days, and I can promise you it's probably not going to be sustainable over the next while. I said,
yes,
let's
yeah,
start with 4 days or even 3 days and
I
go from
love it.
there. So that's the side of it too. Do you know what I mean? That
Yeah,
you have to get people on that realistic,
such a great
because
point.
yeah, you know, it is. So there's a lot to dissect there with that one, of the inconsistency and being able to adhere to things, you know. But if the program is in the right place, and that's our job as trainers, is like, okay, this is something that they can follow and they can stick with. You know, diet wise, we're not just dieting them into the ground to get a fat loss result. They're finding, oh, I can do this. Like, I have plenty of clients who, you know, we're going the slower route, but it's working. It might be making for
Absolutely.
this mental, you know, before and after over the space of 12 weeks, but they're gradually getting there, and they're doing it in a much healthier fashion, and they're not finding it overwhelming initially. And that's what can happen with people. Too much change at once is overwhelming and can lead to people just saying, oh, this is way too much, and they kind of take the foot off the pedal.
Yeah,
So yeah.
that's such, yeah, like I feel sometimes, Barry, as you said, the enthusiasm is always there for like the first 2 weeks. So, like, you know, I always ask the same thing. Like, so I preface by asking, how many times a week do you currently train? And someone
Yeah.
who like is inconsistent training 2 times a week suddenly thinks that they can train up to 6 times a week. It's just not realistic. So what I always say is like, yeah, you know what, let's start out with three. And if we get 3 out of 3 done, that's the job done. If you want a
Mm,
fourth done, you know, we can maybe add an optional fourth. But just from my coaching
yeah.
experience, 3 out of 3 builds confidence, 3 out of 4 can take away. Because, you know, if you like have a workout, you said you were going to do it, and then you didn't get to it by the end of the week, even if you did get your 3 sessions, or even if you did get your fourth session, but you missed your fifth, you can sometimes feel like a failure. So it also comes back to, like, as you said, being realistic, but also just being consistent. And I think consistency, Barry, a big part of like adherence and consistency is actually enjoyment too. Like,
Yeah.
obviously, you know, no one enjoys doing rear foot elevated split squats, but they are really, really good. But just
Yeah,
for the most part, like at least getting some element of enjoyment from your training.
hugely. Absolutely, man. You said it nicely there yourself. There is a level of, look, you're not going to be smiling on the final reps of squats. It doesn't happen. But a client, you know, genuinely, a client just said it to me today. She said it's the first time she's been actually enjoying her training. You
There
know,
we go.
she did F45 for quite a while over here in Australia before this, and you know, while it was, you know, good and effective, you know, she wasn't thoroughly enjoying it. Like, you know what I mean? It was this sort of like, you know, run you into the ground as much as possible for a result. And she wasn't understanding what she was doing either, because she wasn't
Yes.
being
Yeah.
educated. You're kind of, you know, and that's not to you know, point the finger at that, but in general, if no matter what sort of program you're doing or where you're training and stuff like that, you have to be enjoying it to a certain extent. And I think as well, you have to be understanding it. So that's why we don't just send on a plan to somebody and tell them, here, just follow this, don't ask questions. We coach
And
and we
off
try
we
to
go.
educate
Yeah.
people.
Set and
Yeah,
forget.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
None of
Exactly. You know, yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like you have to have a clue of what's going on too, and recognize why you're doing this all. I think like that, you start to see, you know, you have a better understanding of it all, and then you start to enjoy your training a lot more with that as well. So massively, it's a huge part of it. I mean, if you're just simply not going to stick with something for too long if you're miserable with it. And that's why I think, you know, I say to some people at times, it doesn't mean the gym is for everyone. I think for the people that say, oh, I hate the gym, no, the gym isn't for me, I've tried it, it's kind of like, it was probably a large misunderstanding of the gym. You
Mm.
simply didn't have the
And they could have
guidance, like
just
we've
had a
talked.
bad first
bad,
experience, a
bad
trainer
experience.
or someone
Exactly.
laughing at them. Like that's why,
Yeah.
you know, on previous episodes we just spoke about
Yeah.
just gym confidence and like not being a
Exactly.
complete a-hole to someone who's just new to starting out, like just being friendly. And because those
Completely.
first experiences can really shape their overall
Yeah.
view of the gym. But I just
Yeah.
think as well, Barry, I mean, you mentioned motivation, which kind of comes back to consistency too. And
Mm.
like, look, here's the thing. Um, I'm not motivated to run, but by God, if I saw if someone was if a dog or something was chasing me, whether I'm motivated or not, I'd have to freaking go or he's gonna bite me.
This
So
is it.
sometimes like you just gotta bite the bullet and just you gotta go. And motivation comes from seeing results. This way we always say, like, motivation comes from seeing results, and you only get results from actually doing the work and taking the action. So it's
Yeah.
kind of that fine line there, but just enjoying your training, being consistent with it, not kind of having like, you know, going to Instagram and checking out Barry's page and, oh, I saw Barry doing this exercise, I'm going to completely ditch my program now and just do what Barry did. And then I see the
Yeah.
next fancy online coach next week on Instagram and I'm going to try out, like, that's not consistent either, because you're just trying out a load of different things and it's unlikely to get results. So, you know, follow
100%.
your plan, build your strength, don't test your strength, eating the correct amount of food, and just be consistent with your training. All very
Hugely.
important points, Barry. And our last topic then for today, prioritizing the wrong exercises, Barry. Do you want to kind of talk a little bit more about this?
Yeah, I think like it's probably similar to, you know, our second point of testing versus building
Yeah.
strength. It probably ties in that. That's an example. Prioritizing wrong exercises, or just training poorly in general, or not training conducive to our goal. You know, and a big part of it, like we talk about, like starting off as well, point one, not following a plan, is coming into a gym and really not, you know, dissecting your form and your technique on all of these sort of movements that we need to be doing. And you just don't get the most out of those exercises then. And also, you know, when we optimize, I say to clients all the time, it's saying I have, you know, optimize technique and you minimize injury. So that's a huge part of why we do
Love
what
it.
we do. We want to get the most out of the exercise, but we also want to minimize, you know, how often we've seen people end up like, you know, doing something, you know, niggly injury in the gym or hurting their shoulder or something, simply because probably, like, I mean, we all get unlucky at times, but probably because technique was off, and they didn't, they weren't optimizing their technique. So things like that, to begin with, like just not getting form right, is a huge part of it. And we see it all the time. Lads come into the gym, they will pick up the dumbbells that they think they should lift, and they work their form around that rather than the other way around. It's kind of putting the cart before the
Brilliant.
horse that way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think, you know what I mean? And we're, again, one of those things we were guilty of for a couple of years, too many. But yeah, like prioritizing wrong exercises specifically, it comes down again. It brings us back to what I always say, okay, what's the goal here? What are we trying to achieve? If we look at like the likes of compounds and stuff like that and accessory work, like they all have their place, thankfully. Again, it's going to be specific to the person. I will do like a specific movement screening with clients when they start with me first, just to see how they are with their different movement patterns. Are they going to, have any restrictions? Have they any pain? And are they going to be able to do, a hip hinge movement? If not, we're probably going to be struggling to do any sort of an RDL. So these are the sort of things you have to
Absolutely.
assess first.
Yes.
So it's very, very important to look at that. But again, yeah, like we said, prioritizing the wrong exercises. Again, if we're looking from a hypertrophy standpoint, not everybody needs to be in a barbell, a squat in a squat rack, squatting. It's going to depend on your the shape of your body, all of those sort of things that are going to have a massive factor. So again, like I will have certain clients who are in the squat rack and they're built for it. But then there's going to be other people that they're just going to be much more suited to be in a leg press. And the beauty of it is the outcome is going to be very, very similar. For what they're trying to achieve, we're
Absolutely.
trying to work the quads through a range of motion. Both of those are going to do a very, very similar job. So it's small things like that is just getting it right. And that's going to, my point being really, it's going to come down to the specific individual. And that's why, like you made the point of there, looking on Instagram and looking at these exercises we see certain people doing, it's good to try them out, but to know that that exercise mightn't be the one for you.
The most
And that the
suitable.
one,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But it's good, over time to try all these out and stuff like that. But to know you have a structure of a program of exercises that are suited to you, that you have your technique down to, fine-tuned down to, as close as we're always going to be, trying to perfect our technique and stuff like that. That's always a work in progress. But for the most part, getting those things right, because if that's off, we're not going to have a good session. And that will tie back to the thing of leaving the gym and just feeling like, did I do the right thing there? You're not going to leave the gym in a
Yeah.
good mood. And then also you're not going to get the most out of your workout, and you're not getting the most out of your workout. You're going to be falling short of your goal over time. And that's what's going to lead to you just saying, again, this isn't it,
Yeah. And I think actually prioritizing the wrong exercise, it goes for like someone who is just starting out, Barry, and someone who's also more advanced, because
Yeah.
if you're starting out, you have to earn the right to like touch a barbell, and you don't just jump straight under a barbell back squat and fire on 20 kilos either side and see how you get on. So a regression would be maybe something more suitable for you, would be like a goblet squat, where you hold the dumbbell to your chest and maybe even sit back into a box. But then on the flip side, Barry, like someone who does have a bit more training experience and they've just been doing back squats in the 6 to 8 rep range for the last 4 years. Well, you know what? Maybe you need to actually go the other way and try to progress it. So, okay, you've been doing the 6 to 8 rep range. Why not try add a little tempo now? Or why not add a pause to the bottom? Or let's actually change up your rep range completely. Or maybe, instead of doing a back squat, we do a loaded front squat. Or same with a deadlift, okay, you've just been deadlifting off the floor. Why don't we try out a deficit deadlift? Or why don't we try out an elevated deadlift and work in different rep ranges? So prioritizing the wrong exercise, it's not just like jumping straight under the bar, but if you're more advanced too, and you're just doing the same thing over and over again, yes, it's important to be consistent with that lift, but everything works and nothing works forever. And you do need to have some element of variety. Barry, you mentioned yourself prioritizing technique. So a great way to work in your technique is to focus on eccentric, slow lowering. So let's lower the weight down in the squat for a count of 3, 2, 1. And now we've got that control. And maybe your next phase, you pause at the bottom for a count of 1, 2, 3, and now we've got that stability. And then in the next phase, we might say, okay, let's explode up as quick as we can, and we've got that power. So there's so many different ways that we can go about this. But yeah, prioritizing the wrong exercises, like I know
100%.
Barry, starting out, I would have like just you do the bench press, you do a set of bicep curls, tricep push downs, and that's your upper body workout. I never even knew your upper back muscles existed, and that's freaking why my shoulders started hurting, because I was just doing the wrong exercises. So, and it's getting the balance right. But let's just kind of quickly recap. So Barry, so the first thing that we would say is someone that they actually follow a plan.
Yeah, 100%. Following a plan, I think, is where you start off, because you can go into a gym and you can, like I said, from both sides of the spectrum of nutrition and from training, anything after that, you're kind of jumping the gun. If you don't have specific direction and programming that's conducive to your goal, you're kind of wasting your time. You're going to spin in your wheels, and it's going to be a frustrating process that will lead you kind of back to square one and saying, I'll leave it till next year, sort of thing.
Exactly. So we have a plan to follow. Then what we mentioned for the testing versus building strength. So a great way to analyze that is just count your total number of reps. You spoke with them, Barry, about like just the calorie intake, and this applies, to both muscle gain and fat loss. So dialing in your calories, making sure that they're actually on point. We spoke about consistency and just adhering to your program and following it from start to finish. And then finally, doing prioritizing the correct exercises, whether you are a beginner, intermediate or more advanced. You got to be challenging yourself in such a way that you can like activate but not annihilate. So Barry, this has been awesome, this episode. I feel our listeners are going to get a ton of value. But just before we finish up, Barry, let's just talk about what yourself. So what are you kind of currently working towards, Barry? Do you have anything? You mentioned you're focusing more on building muscle at the moment.
Yeah, I suppose it's such as the life. I don't think I've ever come off that, but in terms of look, it's always that sort of phase of trying to build muscle. But no, I haven't gone into a strict cutting phase. To be brutally honest, man, it's been, I've done diet breaks, but I haven't done a strict cut in. It's about 2.5 years now. And to be honest with you, the reason being, life took over. Like I was always tried to stay consistent with my training, but like most of us, through a certain amount of COVID and lockdowns, it was hard. But still managed to get it done to a certain extent. Absolutely. But the last few months, I've been really focusing on a building phase, gaining phase, like as as much as ever as before. So very, very, very high calories. Calories are at 4,000 to 5,000, over 5,000 some days. So plenty of food anyway. Not going hungry, and just with that training heavy. Kind of lower volume, kind of high intensity, and just trying to put on size. So and it's working, because I think for a long time I struggled with that. It was usually a calorie factor. I wasn't probably taking in enough. Now I'm pretty much up there, and I think I tipped the scales at 90 kilos last night. I'd never seen that before. So in a good place with that, and the reason being, with that, I was actually making this point to a guy at the gym today. I'm not just putting on that weight, to sound heavier and for the crack to look at the scales, but the beauty of it is I'm pushing more weight in the gym. Mass equals mass. So I'm able to, all my lifts are up, my squats, all those sort of movements, I'm able to push and pull more weight in the gym rewarding, because I have more mass in my frame. It is, exactly. It just means you have that 100%.
And progress is addictive. So, yeah.
100%. 100%. And how about yourself? Like, are you in a similar phase, or?
Just kind of going through like a bit of a bulk phase as well, Barry. And you know what? Something like I need to give myself permission to do is like, if you are going through this process, you got to give yourself permission that you will put on, you know, a certain level of body fat, and the amount and how much is going to be dependent on your food quality as well. So like, that's just something that in the past I would have struggled with, because I was kind of like too much tied to the aesthetics, and I want to look a certain way year round. But then if you're like always in that like maintenance or even cutting phase, it just kind of means then that if you do want to like progress and build your strength, or even just look a bit better and perform a bit better, the opportunity cost is you will gain a bit of body fat. And the hard thing too, I find, Barry, is the areas, if you're just coming off a cut and you want to go on to like a bit of a bulk, the parts of your bodies that you find like most stubborn to drop body fat, they're usually going to be the places you put it back on first when you go into that bulk phase. But you just got to give yourself permission. Okay, like if you are going through like a bulk phase, you got to give yourself permission that you will put on some element of body fat. And just like if you are going through a bit of a cut, the cost of that is at times, and maybe if done correctly, it should be minimized, but at times you will be slightly hungry. But that is part of the process. Now, you shouldn't be starving, but that's also part of the process. So you just got to understand, I think, things from both sides of the spectrum, Barry. Depends on your goal. But just to finish up, Barry, this is the Lifestyle Lifter Show, and look, we're not pro athletes by any means. So tell me for yourself, Barry, you know, how do you kind of balance, just as you said, staying consistent with your training? Sure, you know, COVID gets in the way for it, or has gotten in the way for everyone, but just like trying to be as consistent as possible. But how do you balance this with the social side? Like just going out for a few drinks the weekend, or eating out at a restaurant with your friends. How do you like get the best of both worlds, Barry?
Yeah, I think it's probably important as well for me to recognize it can be hard. The position I'm in at the moment is easier in that, you know, I'm in a growing phase, so I'm in a surplus. So kind of managing calories, like it's nearly hard to get some of the calories in some days, but when it comes to eating out, having drinks at the weekend, I have that leeway. As opposed to somebody who might be, you know, trying to lose weight and stuff like that, we have to be a lot stricter, and we have to find ourselves either tracking or intermittent or calorie banking and stuff like that to make space for those drinks. But honestly, I just think it's a consistency overall, man. When you take a step back, you kind of see, look, if you're somebody who has a structure there, you get the week off to the right start, you know, you eat pretty well, you get a couple of training sessions in, you're active, you know, you hit a certain amount of steps. You know, when the weekend comes, if you're that person who's, you know, generally speaking, you know, consistent, you're, you know, with your training, with your diet, you're in a good place. Going out for a few drinks or going out for that food, it isn't going to dampen or you know, hinder that too much. It's all going to depend on the amounts, really. At the end of the day, we know that, like, you know, it's kind of like, you know, does alcohol, you know, do the damage? And it's like, it does, but again, it's, you know, the dose makes the poison. So it's always going to be that, and that's really what it boils down to. You know, again, it just comes back to that consistency, I think, though. You know, what you do most of the time is more important than what you do some of the time, and that's really, really key for people to understand. And I think, you know, people, you know, it's easy for us on our PT perch sometimes to say like, oh, this is, you know, this isn't that hard. It's easier because, you know, obviously we thoroughly enjoy the lifestyle of it, and, you know, we find ourselves in the gym every day because of what we do, and that's definitely a factor, and it makes it easier for us. But I think, you know, if, you know, and we could talk all day again about it, but if you're doing it for the right reasons, you're going to be enjoying your training. And when you enjoy your training and the type of training you do, and you're starting to see the results, you're going to be consistent with it. And when you do that, I think you just have a much healthier lifestyle overall. You have a much better relationship with food as well, I find. When you can get to that point where you understand what you're doing, and you're kind of in control of your food and stuff like that, and you never feel like you're in this dieting phase, and you're then punishing yourself after a weekend of it, and you're back to square one on the Monday. Look, we all go through it. We all eat too much at times. We all drink too much at times. And we're, you know, paying. Yeah, we're paying for it. But again, it boils back to what you're doing on a consistent basis. And I just know for me, it's about enjoying yourself as well. I enjoy my training, but I also enjoy, everything else. So it's
Yeah.
about having the right steps in place for the most part. And with that, then you never have to feel guilty necessarily about enjoying yourself or letting your hair down when the weekends come. And I think that's what it's about, really.
Definitely, yeah, yeah, and just having something to look forward to too. I think it's important. Something just
100%.
to motivate you and keep you going, because there are obviously
Absolutely.
times when we all go through tough phases or whatever, but just having something to look forward to, I think it can be a good drive and a motivating factor. But Barry, just before we wrap up, so like, what are like just very, very briefly, what are like 1 to 3 takeaways that you'd like our listeners to implement after hearing both of us speak?
Yeah, I think hands down, if there's one anyway, most importantly, it's like just just get that kind of structure that you need. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, if no matter who it is, or just get help from somebody. It's going to um massively, save you time and energy and frustration.
Yeah.
You're going to kind of jump the queue in terms of those sort of rookie mistakes that we all make. Again, with your diet and stuff like that, you're going to need certain guidance. Just reach out to somebody, even if you're not hiring a coach, reach out to them, and they can give you, like
Just
we're
ask
always
for
doing
some
with our
feedback. Yeah.
content. Yeah, when
Yeah.
people message me, DM me, asking me questions, I'll help you out for free. It's one of those things, like, you want to help people, even if it's something small, and it could be those few small things that people listen to from this today of, tracking your calories for a few days, actually trying to get yourself onto a training program you can follow. Those sort of things, they're going to be the fundamentals that get you
Brilliant.
on the right path. Everything else starts to slowly fall into place. You can
Yeah.
fine tune things
Brilliant.
from there, but getting those few things right first is going to be crucial, because that's what's going to kind of get the ball rolling in the right direction. And if that doesn't happen and you're not doing those things, it just won't take off, and you're
Yeah.
just going to end up frustrated. And again, you're going to find yourself not where you want to be, and that's why we see so many people either don't stick to something, or they will for a while, and then they just fall off, and they're back to
Brilliant.
square one.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest one. Like I said, I could elaborate on all of them again, and there's so much more there to dissect, but I
But
think
they're
it's
the
just that
key
initial thing of
takeaways. Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. What about yourself?
Yeah, no, like, just if there's one thing, yeah, like, just have a plan, have a structure, and test and measure. Test and measure. Try it out for at least 4 weeks before you say the gym isn't for me, this plan isn't for me, this isn't working, because you're not gonna know otherwise if you just keep trying and spinning your wheels doing a different thing each week. So just, if there's one takeaway, it's just going to be, have a plan, have a routine, have something to follow, and test and measure for a couple of weeks and
Yeah,
assess, did you get results? And if not, okay, well, maybe I need to change something about the program. Maybe my food wasn't on
yeah,
point, but at least you're giving some feedback. Um,
yeah.
Barry, I feel we could go on and on, but I just want to first of all acknowledge you. I think we really have like very similar. We agree in a lot of things. I feel like, I love the way you mentioned that even with your clients there, that it's more so like, just sure, they're not going to get like the most amazing 12-week results for this particular client,
Mm,
but it was much more sustainable to fit it into our lifestyle. And if someone does want that approach too, of course we can go there. But I really like your approach. Is similar to mine. It's about just building it into each individual's lifestyle. And some
yeah,
people, they can train 4 or 5 times a week, but then you know what, other people like 2 or 3 times a week is what they're able to commit to given their circumstances. So I
yeah.
really like the way, Barry, similar to myself, you build your coaching around the individual rather than the other way around, where it's like, okay, you got to fit in my expectations, and
Yeah,
and here's what we're going to do. So I just want to acknowledge you for
100%.
that, Barry. And my final two questions, Barry, I'm big into like just morning routines, rituals, and starting the day off well. I'm just curious, Barry,
Mm.
what do like the first 60 to 90 minutes of your day look like? Do you have any like routine you follow, or
Yeah, to be honest, so these days, man, for me, it's if it on a Monday, it's getting up for a run. Usually with a couple of guys, we set the I set the alarm for about maybe 20 to 6 and
Brilliant.
run down Bondi Road, and we go for it's close to a 7K run, and if
Savage.
we finish it up in Bondi Beach, and we go for a dip there at sunrise, and then we sit and have a coffee. So that's what
What a
my
way
Monday
to start the
mornings.
week.
Yeah, man, it's beautiful. Like, so it's nice to be in that position where you
Yeah.
can do that now. So that's what my Mondays look like, and like I said, it's a lovely start to the week. And from there, then, to be honest, these days, like I've taken back on one-to-one clients, and I've never been busier in my life with it, which is, look,
Brilliant.
it's a great
Yeah.
great complaint. So the alarm again goes a bit earlier. It's like Tuesday to Fridays these days. I'll be about 5:15. I'd be up
Yeah.
and I'd be straight
Yeah.
out. I'd make a shake, and I'd be on the road over to the gym. Would take about 20 minutes to get there, and I train my first client at 6. I would have my double espresso knocked back, and I would train 3 to 4 clients in a row. And then I might have a gap in the morning from there, and I might do some laptop work, get a bit of breakfast, and I train clients throughout the day then after that, or
Yeah.
train myself. So
Yeah.
that's usually what it looks like. Mondays are a little bit different, but then the rest of the week, I literally, I have 6 a.m.
Down to
clients
business.
every morning, down to business, man. Yeah. And look,
Absolutely.
it's one of those things that it's never easy getting up at that time, or going over and being wide awake and training people. But it's one of those things that I definitely love doing, no more than yourself.
Absolutely.
It's kind of, you have a
Yeah.
passion for it, and it's not one of those things, I think, you'll never work a day in your life sort of thing, is a bit overrated. We definitely still
I
don't,
agree 100%.
you
But
know, you know.
I think just, yeah, for me, it's like, I get to do this first. I have to do this. And just
Yes.
having that reframe, it can help you get, because look, there's obviously parts of every job that no one likes doing, but you still got to do.
Yeah.
But it's just like, once you have a passion for it, once you have a fuel for it, and if you're in it for the right reasons, for helping others, that's going to
Yeah.
push you through. And Barry, final question, because this is the Lifestyle Lifter show. What's your
Yes.
definition of just living a successful lifestyle?
It's something I've thought a lot about recently, and honestly, it's hands down going to be simply, if you can get up and every morning, and you have the freedom to pretty much do whatever you like.
Brilliant. Yeah.
I think you're living a successful life. You're kind of winning. And again, the beauty of that is that's different for everybody else. For some people, that's getting up and, being in I don't know, a financial position where you can, get up late in the morning and go out and sit out in a pool. That's fantastic. But for the next person, that could literally be getting up at the crack of dawn to go and do a job that's other people would consider hell, but that person loves it. So at
I
the end of
love
the day, I
it.
think
Yeah.
it's, if you have that freedom to get up, like I say to people, I know if you're the same, but if I won the lotto in the morning, I would still keep training people and coaching people to a certain extent. I mightn't be doing the 6 a.m. clients every morning, but I would
7 or
definitely
8 a.m. maybe instead. A bit of a
yeah,
sleep
yeah,
in, Barry. I
exactly.
love it.
But
That's such a great way to
yeah,
put it. Yeah.
mm,
If yeah, like just this whole like kind of idealism that, if I win the lotto, I'm just gonna stay in the beach for the rest of my life.
yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't last more than 2 or 3 days before I'm like, right, I need to get working or do something with
Crack
myself,
up.
or I just crack up. Exactly. Barry, this has been
Yeah.
awesome. Let's just finally, before we go, Barry, share to our listeners now, where can people find out more about Barry O'Sullivan and everything that you offer?
Yeah, man, look, hands down, it's going to be Instagram and Facebook. If you search me at O'Sullivan Fitness, you'll find me on Instagram,
O'Sullivan
and on
Fitness.
Facebook too. Yeah, that's where you're going to get me, and where if you ever want to reach out to me, you'll find me there. Yeah, that's where it is. Like I said, if you're over this side of the pond, you might find me in Sydney in person, but for another while you won't see me back home in Ireland. But yeah, absolutely, Instagram and Facebook,
Perfect.
you get hold of me.
Thank you, Barry. Awesome stuff. So just appreciate everyone for listening. If you did find this show helpful, beneficial, if you learned anything, please pay the fee. And the fee, it's very, very small. Just take a screenshot of the episode, share it on your IG or your Facebook stories, and tag Barry at O'Sullivan Fitness and tag me at Mac Lifestyle Fitness. And we'll both reshare to our stories. So Barry, just thanks so much again for coming along. It's been such an epic episode. I think we're just short of the hour here. And if you did get value in this show also, please leave a review, leave a rating, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That's all for now, Barry. We're going to have to do we've already done 2 IG Lives. We've done a podcast now together as well. We're going to have to do a take 2 some stage down the line.
I can't wait, man. Really, really appreciate having me on as well. I always really, really thoroughly enjoy our chats and stuff like this. So yeah, look forward to it very, very soon again, man.